Hello, you're listening to In the Mix, the podcast all about the Great British Bake Off. My name is Greer and I'm here with JP.
Hello, hello.
And we're going to talk about pastry this week, which is exciting.
Yes.
But one of the things that I can't get my head around before we get on to talking fully about pastry is that we're over halfway through now. How has this happened? It's been so quick.
I know. This was episode 6. We've got 4 more left to go. We have got 6 bakers next week. Yeah, 6 bakers next week. It's one of those things every year. We wait for Bake Off for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then all of a sudden you blink and you're halfway through the series. It's given us some great stuff so far this year, but I'm just really sad that it's nearly over.
I know, I can't believe it. I thought something that was really funny is that Giuseppe said at the beginning that he didn't really expect to be in the tent for that long, so he didn't bring enough shirts, and he's just had to kept going out and buying shirts somewhere, which I like. So it's taken everyone by surprise, even the bakers, I think.
Yes. Yeah, I suppose none of them come in feeling, well, I'm going to get there for the final, but you need to be a bit more prepared, Giuseppe. Come on.
I know, exactly. Yeah. We had a bit of Bake Off news last week, which I thought I'd bring up because I also watch Extra Slice. So we've got the Bake Off on Tuesdays, we've got our podcast, and then we've got Extra Slice. So Bake Off is a gift that keeps on giving in our houses. And hopefully our listeners' houses. But something that we learned from Extra Slice last week is that actually Christelle, Lizzie and Freya all seem to be like the best of friends. And Lizzie and Freya have actually got matching Bake Off tattoos that they went and got. They have a little whisk and GBBO, I think, written on their ankles, which is quite sweet. But yeah, I love how they've turned into like best friends, and they've been watching the shows together and everything. And at the beginning of this week's episode, I think it was Christelle that was like, right, I said to Lizzie, we're going to do this for Freya.
Yeah, it's really nice. Do you know what? That's one of the things that all the way through the series you get really nice friendships with them, and you still get on social media the occasion, like Val and Andrew, I seem to remember from Candice's year.
Yep.
You know, they every year, 1 week a year will sit and watch Bake Off together, sort of thing. They have some really nice friendships, and I suppose now that they're in the bubble as well, there's even more reason to get on with everyone. I saw some social media posts about there was one I saw yesterday of Lizzie, Freya and Maggie doing a dance on TikTok, which she just posted up, and I was like, this is just brilliant this year. I love it.
It's so good. I love that Maggie's in there. Maggie's on TikTok. Yeah. She hasn't stuck to the traditional when it comes to her social media platforms. So go Maggie. One of the things that I enjoy doing before the episode starts is taking a look on the GBBO hashtag and seeing all of the snacks and the bites to eat everyone's got and prepared and bought from the shop or whatever to eat along with Bake Off. And this week, you excelled in your Bake Off snack. You sent me a photo of it on Twitter, and our listeners can find it on the January Media on Twitter, because you were actually baking this week.
I did, yeah. See, this is the thing. I like a themed snack for Bake Off, as you know. And my girlfriend and I, when we watch the episodes on Tuesday, we like to have something themed. So German week, we were going to have pretzels. Didn't manage to have pretzels. Can't remember what we had. But bread week, we got some bread. Cake week, we got some cake. And sometimes we will try and bake. But this week, we went out to the supermarket on Tuesday morning. And I was like, right, it's pastry week this week. I'm just going to buy some pastry. So I got a roll of puff pastry. And I got it back home and just I don't know what I'm going to make with it. Literally raided the cupboards and just ended up making pinwheels with like chocolate hazelnut spread inside and various different things. But yeah, it was nice. I love baking, and I think when you've got the Bake Off on, it's a great excuse to do a little bit of baking, and I sort of like sticking with the theme. You're similar though. You quite like a snack during Bake Off.
I do like a snack during Bake Off. At the moment with the podcast and everything, I haven't had a lot of time to get on baking, and I was very jealous when I saw yours. I was like, I can imagine it's going to be nice and soft and warm, and I was jealous. So I'd love to get back on to baking a few things. I do like eating a snack with Bake Off, but I don't necessarily have the discipline to theme it. So I usually just go, right, what chocolate am I in the mood for? And at the moment, I can't remember if I've spoken about this on the podcast already to you, because I've been telling everyone about it. But my new favourite chocolate bar, and I think it eclipses pretty much most other chocolate bars I've ever eaten, which is a lot. If you know me, I have eaten most chocolate bars on the planet.
Of the chocolate.
Exactly. And this chocolate bar is amazing. It is the new Whisper hazelnut. I want to say it's Whisper Gold. Ooh. Whisper Gold's the one with the caramel in, isn't it? So I feel like it's a Whisper Gold hazelnut because it's got the caramel in there too. It does taste like Nutella. It's exceptional. I can't not buy, just one. I have to buy a few.
I've not heard of that one. I'm going to have to go and find that because I like a Whisper Gold. I'm a big fan. I've not tried that one yet.
It's a limited edition, I think. So make sure next time you're in the shop, get it. You have to. This is not paid for, but if you want to pay me, Cadbury, then I will be a loyal servant of yours.
This is not a hashtag ad. But no, it made me laugh as well because actually when we went to the shop yesterday, we also bought a malt loaf, which after our prior conversations this series.
What? Why would you buy the malt loaf? It's like buying the mini rolls or the jelly or the raisins. I thought I wasn't a picky eater. I'm not really, but I do have a lot of strong food opinions on here. I know, I'm coming across as like I hate everything, but something about me that I pride myself on is literally just eating anything. But
but not malt loaf.
Malt loaf. Those pinwheels, I'm sorry, you had those. They were exceptional. Why get the malt loaf?
They were good, not going to lie. In fact, we've just finished the last one of them because we made sort of 15 little ones. We tear and share them as well. It's so good. I want more.
Dream. Living the dream.
Living the dream.
Talking about preferences when it comes to pastry and snacks, something that I needed to ask you is, have you A, ever heard of a choux bun before? And B, have you ever eaten one before?
I have, yeah. So choux pastry, profiteroles, and eclairs as well, traditional sort of chocolate eclairs. They're choux pastry. So, I have had choux buns before.
I think I meant to ask you whether you've had choux donuts before, but my mouth ran away with me and said buns. I meant donuts. Because obviously, I've eaten an eclair. I've eaten choux donuts.
I was like, we'll sidestep that one. It's the teamwork we have.
Yeah, I know. It shows just how weird choux donuts are. If I'm just thinking choux buns, I'm sorry, I've never heard of choux donuts. Obviously, I've heard of choux buns, but choux donuts, they are so weird. And obviously, it seems so wrong for me to say that I just went with the standard choux buns. And you were so polite. You were so just kind and polite replying to that. And I was like, I've asked him a dumb question. But choux donuts, have you eaten them or heard of them ever before?
No, this is another one of the Great British Bake Off FA Cup styly tasks, I think. I've heard of Cronuts, the croissant donuts. I've heard of those. And I, every now and then, make scronuts, which is when you have a scone and you take out the middle bit and there's like the ring around the outside. And I'm like, sod it, can't be asked to make another scone. So I just stick that on and turn it into a sconut. But choux nuts, no.
No, they're mad. And the thing is, I didn't enjoy the little VTs or whatever, the interviews with Paul and Prue when they start doing the signature bake. They say, okay, this week we're going to make choux nuts or whatever, and everyone's cracking on. But then everyone is acting as if they know what they are. Paul was like, if you've never heard of a choux nut before, well, it's this. And it's like, no one has heard of a choux nut before. Stop acting like you're better than us, Paul. It isn't bread week. So it really got me annoyed. So,
I suppose now we're on the 12th series, they are going to start making things up because we're just running out of ideas, aren't we?
I think so.
Yeah, it was a strange one. To be fair, I liked the idea of the challenge. I liked the idea of the fact that they were deep frying choux pastry. I've not thought of that before. But yeah, I don't like it when they're like, oh, well, it's obviously this. Come on, you idiots. No, admit you've made it up for the show.
Exactly, please. They have, completely. So I didn't enjoy being a little bit patronised by the judges this week. You haven't eaten a choux donut. Well, no, I can't even say the phrase choux donut. It's that alien to me.
It's just wrong.
I know. So there are a few interesting elements to it. People had some really interesting flavours, obviously. So they had to make 2 batches of the decorated choux nuts. 6 had to be filled and 6 not, so they had to be glazed or iced instead. But it's always a worry, I think, to some people when they bring out the deep fat fryers on Bake Off. People think, is that really baking? And you could see some of them were quite nervous around the fryers, and others were like, oh yes, this is where I excel. Lizzie was one of the people that seemed quite terrified with the fact that she might have to fry her signature bake.
Yeah, I mean, she was talking about the fact that choux nuts were the devil's food, and I thought that was hilarious, considering, again, it had just been invented 25 minutes before.
I know.
But it's like, already it's the devil's food. But, I've never seen somebody like that for a signature, particularly a technical. Usually we have, puts the fear into them, but not with a signature one when they get the chance to practice when they're not watching Harry Potter DVDs.
Exactly.
Having said that, I do love the controversy when we get a bake which isn't a bake. Thinking about, we had naan breads at barbecue once, and everyone was going, right, they're not even in the tent now. Like, what is going on? Bake Off has jumped every single shark out there. Yeah. I quite like social media and people's reactions when we do something a bit different. But I think deep fat frying was an interesting one, but it's not baking.
No, it's true. And I thought that Lizzie's reaction, you do get two types of people in life. I think those that, love using the deep fat fryer, and then people who are just absolutely outraged. People are like, absolutely not. I've never had a deep fat fryer. It's so unhealthy. Or they're just scared that it will set alight, So Lizzie, she seemed really put off by the fryer. But then, as you say, she really didn't like the idea of making a Choux-nut, saying at the end after she made hers, I think Noel said, would you try yours, Lizzie? And she was like, absolutely not. They're horrible. So it was just a bit of a weird reaction, wasn't it? Like you say, everyone gets a bit worked up by the technical, but she hated Choux-nuts. Do you think that she's been wronged by someone that was into choux pastry or donuts or something before? Because there's a grudge there that we need to know more about.
It's deep rooted, isn't it? And I loved Prue's reaction right at the end when she'd presented her Choux-nuts and she'd got her feedback, and Prue was like, you're very fast sort of ruining my lifelong mantra that anybody who loves baking can bake. And she was like, Lizzie hates this. It's ridiculous. But she did quite well in them, to be fair. She
did quite well. And she was someone that did maybe a more normal flavour this week. Raspberry liqueur. I don't even know what hibiscus is. I'm not even going to try and guess what that is. You probably
hibiscus,
know.
You can get... It's flour, I think. Is it? Because you can get hibiscus tea and.
I was going to say, it's definitely
I think it's like a leaf or a flowery thing, isn't it?
Yeah. So when hibiscus isn't the weirdest flavour that has been used is worrying. Many. No. Some more people that had sort of normal stuff was Chigs with his chocolate pastry and lime glaze. So I guess like key lime pie kind of type thing. He also did hazelnut praline. George did his sticky toffee pudding, and then he had one with jam and cream as the filling. But there were, I think, 3 people that had some really interesting flavours. Now, the first one I'm going to talk about is Amanda. And I was quite excited by her flavour combination, I'm not going to lie. She went with the sort of sweet and savoury of maple syrup and bacon on her Choux-nuts. What did you make of that?
I like the idea. I like the fact she was pushing it a little bit further. Choux pastry. I'm trying to think, like when I've had profiteroles and stuff, the pastry itself isn't usually that sweet. It's what you put on top or inside.
Yeah.
So, I thought actually that's really good. I loved it though, because Prue in her feedback and Paul were like, yeah, there wasn't really enough of the bacon. And she was like, oh, well, I had tons left over. Well, then put it on the Choux-nut. I mean, come on. It's a stupid thing to say.
What did she do with it? Does she just be snacking on bacon in the corner?
Probably Noel and Matt with the snacking bacon. Yeah. You know what they're like. They're always eating stuff. But yeah, I like the fact she went a bit out of the box with that one. Yeah.
I thought that was quite good. And that is a flavour that I would try, because I guess you have maple syrup and bacon on pancakes. So I was like, I could see that one working quite well. Someone that I wasn't sure how it was going to go, but she did sort of describe it quite well, is Christelle. And she was doing a bit of a twist on the standard salted caramel that everyone loves. And she was trying to make a miso caramel. And she described it as being umami, which they all took the mick out of. But I get what she means. Umami. I get what she means. So... I don't know what it would taste like, to be honest, but I imagine it would be quite good. Salted caramel is excellent, and it could have been alright.
I'd like to give it a go. There's another cooking show that we talk about sometimes because I'm a big fan, is Great British Menu, which is on BBC. And last series, one of them did a miso caramel, like a sort of fudge, as one of their dishes, and it went down an absolute storm. And ever since then I was like, I need to try it and try and work out how to do it. And it's appearing in more and more places actually. So yeah, I had a look when I was out in Japan, because obviously miso big in Japan, didn't have any out there. I was a bit disappointed, but I think having now, I mean, we've now got miso, because as you said a minute ago, I just seem to have all of the pretentious ingredients in my fridge. Miso's nice stuff, so I can imagine how it would go well with the sweetness and be different from salted caramel. But she was brave with that one, because you can get that wrong.
Yeah, definitely. She was brave. And I think, as you say, if it's something that you can see on these, cooking shows, it might become one of those trendy type ingredients that people can get when they're out now. So it might be one to have a little watch. Salted caramel, that started coming into the mainstream, didn't it? And now it's everywhere and everyone literally loves it. It's everyone's favourite flavour. So miso caramel, that could actually, start trending and be out there in the public consciousness. It might.
There's potential.
There's
potential. One day it will land.
Exactly. And you already mentioned Japan, because I was looking forward to this bit, because you were out for the Olympics this year in Japan, and I need to ask you about Jürgen's flavour combinations this week on his Choux-nuts, because he went with, I've heard of yuzu, I've heard of sake,
yes.
But the thing that I haven't heard of is the bright purple filling that he put in his Choux-nuts.
I know. Now, I was watching this bit and I thought, I don't really know what's going on here. First of all, purple, favourite colour. Loved the colour of it. And I thought visually great. Having said that, was it Amanda a few weeks ago that made some very bright, garish coloured something? And I was like, it's like Halloween.
Yeah, it was Lizzie. She did she did a
yes.
purple and she did a green. So it was like taking a leaf out of Lizzie's book, really, with this. But it was ube, I think, what they called it. And yeah, it was apparently a purple yam. And I'm looking at it now and it says that it's big in the Philippines. But I assumed wrongly that it was Japanese because of the yuzu and the sake as well. But yeah, so it was really bright purple. Noel Fielding was really impressed. I could see him wearing a jumper of that colour at some point. It was very him.
Yeah.
Very un-Jürgen-like. We've talked to him about him before being very traditional and quite proper when it came to, intricate bakes and being, that very nice German festive feel. But this purple was completely out there. Zany is what I'd call it.
It was so zany and just not Jürgen whatsoever. And it was weird because being the first bake of the episode, it did make me think, like, what is he on this week? Like, is he okay?
Yeah.
And they look good. To be fair, I thought they looked a bit messy. And we've spoken about the fact that he's quite traditional with his bakes, and you say very, almost quite mathematical with it. And he showed that later on with the technical. But he likes to go for very conservative, calm decoration, which I critiqued him for back in Biscuit Week with his gingerbread windmill, and it, for me, it didn't have enough on it. So yeah, he went completely the other way this week, and I was like, what on earth are you doing? But again, he got good feedback.
Exactly. I feel like Jürgen was exploring a different side of his personality this week that maybe we hadn't seen before, so I thought that was good. One of the other things that kept coming out, it started in the signature challenge. There were a few innuendos, and it is an innuendo heavy episode. And I mean, actually, it's not innuendo anymore, as we talk about regularly. There was jokes about has Paul ever licked a muffin the other week. I'm sorry, I don't need that imagery. But another image that I definitely don't need, and we didn't need to hear it when most people in the world were watching Bake Off and eating their snack, was Prue really describing how she sort of pipes into her Choux-nuts and her choux buns. And I don't even want to repeat it. It was about holes and
Two
it
holes.
was just...
That's all I'm going with. It's just... And didn't it feel a little bit scripted as well?
It's funny. It felt very forced. Oh.
Yeah, the innuendo back in the Mel and Sue days were... the innuendos were quite... They flowed, and you just thought, okay, that's literally one of them's just come up with that funny. Yeah,
BBC innuendos. That's what it was.
Yes, and that's okay. But I don't know that bit yesterday. I mean, I did love Paul and Matt's reaction to that, and them just sort of giggling away. It was good, and a rare little outtake as well, because then Paul started sort of judging, but he stopped and sort of wiped his eyes quickly, and then almost like retook the shot again. And I was like, oh, it's interesting that they showed us that. That was strange, because obviously it's supposed to be also spontaneous and off the cuff, and you could see he went for a second take. But it was a scarring moment that I'm really glad you haven't got a clip to play me, because I was dreading that moment today. I was like, thank the Lord you haven't.
No, it was horrendous. It did feel a bit weird, because she was describing piping and her technique, but I'm sorry, surely she knows that was, like, she picked the words. She did pick the words, I imagine, to make it sound a little bit rude. But it was very rude. I wouldn't want to have had to describe that to my family members about what that meant. It was too far. It wasn't sort of quaint Mel and Sue innuendo. It was like oh, okay, Prue is graphically describing something that I don't want to talk about. And yeah, it was funny. I think the best bit, as you say, was Paul and Matt's reaction. It was the crying. The fact that Paul cries when he laughs, like I do. I warmed to him slightly on that bit. But it just set him off for the rest of the episode. Everything. He talked about Giuseppe's meat later on and just started crying. It was like... It was one of those things, you know, when someone makes a joke in a lesson at school and you weren't meant to laugh, and then it became the funniest thing that would ever happen to you. And it just reminded me of that. Paul wouldn't stop laughing the whole time.
No, and usually that's me as the teacher in a lesson that's making those jokes. So, you know.
Exactly.
So not good.
No. So let's move on to the technical challenge this week, and it was a bit of a big one. People were talking about it because it seemed a bit unfair, really difficult, and it really tested the bakers this week. So they had to make large baklava with Filo pastry, pistachio and walnut filling, and it had to have a starred design on the top. And this is the first time that they've ever done Filo pastry in the tent for a technical challenge. And you could see in the bakers' reactions just how much of like an ache this would be for them. It was just going to be like the worst thing. Christelle, I think, had head in hands when it was announced.
Yeah, it was, I don't know, it was one of those moments, it felt sort of monumental in 12 series that all of a sudden we've got Filo. And we were joking last week of how many times the word rough puff would be mentioned, because usually we have a rough puff pastry or a hot water crust for the technical in pastry week. And so when it was Filo, it absolutely blew, out the water really. But I think this was one of those moments, and we sort of discussed it at home, about the time limit, because... you get the bake and it's going to be the baklava and it looks brilliant. You go to the tent with Paul and Prue, or Prue and Holly as it was this week, and which was weird.
Not and even then, funny. They've also said jockstrap this week, which was interesting. So
yes,
what are they on?
I was like, where are we going with this? But yeah, they went to the tent and they looked at it, and it looked like the example was brilliant. But I can guarantee they didn't make it in the 2 3/4 hours or whatever it was that they had. And we were talking about it here at home because we were saying, do they put the time limit in to make it easier to judge? Because if they all had enough time, they'd all probably be much of a muchness at this stage in the competition. So 7 of the same baklava would be really hard to judge. But like none of them really, without giving too many spoilers of results ahead of time, had the lamination. We love that word in pastry week. It's all about the wooden floors. They didn't have the lamination for the, particularly on the bottom of the baklava. And I was like, well, they haven't really been able to do it because they didn't get the time, which was, I don't know, it was a bit unsatisfying. I don't know about you, but I found that quite unsatisfying.
Yeah, exactly. I think because they were so sort of shocked that they were going to have to make Filo pastry, that this is where the sort of stresses began, because it was a very stressful, second half of the episode, really. And... well, everything went mad, later on in the Showstopper, everything went mad. And I just think that it was a really difficult one. And George, this is when his sort of hilarious lines began, really, for me, because he said, right, let's be confident. It'll be in my DNA because he's Greek Cypriot. And he was like, right, I should know how to make baklava. And then Amanda also, she has Greek Cypriot heritage too. So she was quite like, right, okay, I'm going to do it. But that just sort of shows that how much of a monumental challenge it was going to be. George is very, very amusing. I feel like he was coming out of his shell quite a bit this week, maybe a bit more than usual. He hasn't really had enough screen time, but he was saying some really funny stuff. And obviously, he was trying to crack on with his baklava, but there was a point, I think it was in the signature, just when he couldn't even open the tongs that he was using. They were sort of, sometimes your tongs have a mechanism that means you can actually put them away in a drawer so you don't get them stuck or whatever. And he just couldn't. He was stood there next to Paul, and it was so embarrassing. And I feel like I'd been in a situation like that before, where you're next to the person when someone's watching you, like a driving test, and you suddenly forget how to do everything. You couldn't even open the tongs. So
I know.
George, I don't know how he thought he was going to make an excellent baklava or the Showstopper later if that was how he was beginning the episode. But there were a few mishaps too. In this, Lizzie, she forgot to put her timer on when doing the baklava as well. So it was really shaking people up and worrying them, I think, that they had to do the Filo.
Yeah, my tip, I said this, my tip, I think, if you forget to put a timer on for a bake, particularly in the technical when you're all doing the same thing, don't be the first person to get it out the oven. Because Lizzie was like, okay, well, I forgot my timer, great. And then she was the first one out. And it's like, well, if you didn't start your timer, unless you put yours in like 5-10 minutes before everybody else, why are you getting yours out first? Like, wait for other people to get theirs out, or pay attention to who's putting it in the same sort of time as you. I did sit there and think, and obviously in the feedback, it was then that hers was... not really cooked enough and needed more time in the oven. I was like, well, yeah, because she was the first one out and she definitely wasn't the first one in. So, I was like, I suppose it is the stress, isn't it, of the tent and in those situations. But her face when she was like, oh, I think I've put the timer on for... Oh, no, wait, I've not put the timer on at all. I was not going to attempt the accent. She was like, oh, yeah, I totally forgot that.
I wonder if they noticed, walking around, the producers noticed she hadn't put the timer on. So we're like, right, go ask her how long's left. I bet they do see stuff like that. It was just mad. And I think that was quite a good idea, really, watching. I know you're not meant to like confer and talk to people about what you're doing, but watching to see who's taken theirs out the oven first and stuff. You must know when you're baking, you must have like sort of glanced and gone, oh, Chigs has put his in as well, or whatever. So you know who's next to you and what timings they're sort of on, so you can kind of do it too. Or you could have just, while it's in the oven and someone else is waiting for theirs in the oven, you could have gone, oh yeah, how long you got left on yours? And they're like, oh, 20 minutes. What about you? Oh yeah, same. You could have just done that. I know you're not allowed to talk about it, but that's not giving away the recipe. And I enjoyed someone else's frustration this week too in the technical, and that was Giuseppe, when he said the funny phrase of, it's a hassle, but it didn't sound like hassle because he didn't say, huh. He made it sound rude as well.
He didn't. And there was that brilliant moment where I was like, so obviously this year's series has been plagued with technical issues because of the Red Bee media fire like 5 weeks ago. So we haven't had subtitles. We had an episode which looked like it had gone through gamma radiation. Yeah. We had an episode where the voiceovers were done from a separate tent 35 miles away. It sounded like, because it was so quiet. And honestly, I thought this week that they'd forgotten to put the beep over it because I heard it as a swear word as well. I was like, oh my God. I was like, it's before 9 o'clock. Oh dear. I was like, oh, it's going to go crazy with Ofcom. But it was also Matt Lucas's face when literally Giuseppe explained that it was hassle with an H. It was that, I think, was probably my funniest moment of the episode.
I know. It made me laugh so much. And it was Matt Lucas's reaction too. I think it's funnier when they react because he sort of like was taken aback. Maybe Giuseppe isn't one for actually swearing or saying anything like that. So he looked really like, oh my God, what has Giuseppe just said? Right on camera. I loved it. What a good joke. I thought you were going to say, can you imagine the subtitlers having to type that in and accidentally writing hassle instead of hassle due to the technical difficulties? That would have been good too. But if you've shaken Giuseppe, you know that the Baklava technical is definitely a difficult one. Let's talk about Jürgen for a little bit because, we love Jürgen, but there was just a moment, I know, there was just a moment in this technical challenge where I got a bit of a disliking for him. I know that's going to make people turn the podcast off. Please don't. Keep listening. I know, don't. Come on, keep us company. But there was a moment where they had to do their lovely star design and I think have pistachios on top in different sections. And everyone was looking at it and it was really intricate, going, how on earth am I meant to transfer that onto the top of my baklava? Chigs even said it out into just like the random room and no one was there. And then Noel kind of had to come in and go, what are you talking to me? But Jürgen stood there and was like, well, it's easy, isn't it? This is, I can't even remember what he said. This is like 20 centimetres or whatever, and this is 30.
You just scale it up.
Yeah, is it simple, really? And I was like, is it simple, really? We know you're a very accomplished engineer, or I think he's an engineer, Jürgen, but everyone else in this tent, it's a very British thing, I think, to just absolutely not understand maths.
Yeah. Oh, he's a physicist. Sorry.
Physicist.
Physicist. Yeah, similar. It's funny because obviously we just spoke before the podcast about this bit, and because we don't just speak for this 1 hour a week, but it was I couldn't pinpoint the moment when you said that, because you said that you had that sort of feeling.
Yeah.
But now you said that, I'm like, yeah, I can get what you mean. I know what you mean. I don't know. He's one of those. He's adorable, and you just want to squidge his cheeks, really. Which you shouldn't do with a grown man, but hey ho. And but yeah, there was that moment where it's like, well, not everyone is going to get that. Just hold your horses. Having said that, I did the typical armchair baker thing of looking at that and going, oh, it's easy, you just do it into 8s and then you just work section by section. Past maths teacher,
Yeah.
But yeah, I did the same thing, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd be hated too if I did that in the tent, wouldn't I? It's easy. But it was good. And then of course there was the big dilemma of if you score into the pastry or if you cut right. I mean, like Chigs was basically cutting the slices of his baklava before he even started. It was crazy.
Yeah, it was. I just think Jürgen, he comes out with like good one-liners. When they made a joke earlier on, Paul saying, I think in the signature, oh, save a bottle of German beer for me or something. And he really didn't kind of get the joke, and he just went, oh, well, I'm afraid I haven't brought any with me. So you felt really sort of like, kind of like, oh, Jürgen, you're so endearing. But then he was like, this maths is really, really easy, and then he has a little smile that he puts on that, okay, it's kind of cute, but it's a bit smug. And I'm starting to sort of not be Team Jürgen. I've always been Team Giuseppe for the winner if it's going to be out of the two. But Jürgen, it was a bit grating. I was thinking, you're slightly annoying me now. Is that the very like British thing that we do when people get too good? We start disliking them. The James Corden thing. Oh, we found you. You were overweight and hilarious in Gavin and Stacey, but now you're in America excelling. We hate you. Is that what I'm starting to do?
I think that's what we do. I mean, James Corden is a sore point for me because this is another James. I want his success. I'm overweight and British and not succeeding in LA.
One of those statements is not true. The succeeding in LA, you said 3. So
okay, fair
2
enough.
are not true.
2 are not true. Oh. But yeah, it's I'm not succeeding in LA. Sorry, that made me laugh.
Not at the moment.
One day.
One day. When we take In the Mix International.
Yes. Oh, why don't we do international version? Anyway, sidetrack. But yeah, it's tricky because I'm more Team Jürgen. I find that element in Giuseppe a little bit, and I really like Giuseppe. I think he's a great baker, but I don't know. There's just something that I think most people fall one side or the other of the two, and I don't know. It's tricky. It's tricky this year because, as always, like we like all the bakers and they choose people who have got a great story who you can get to know. And we said that in the first episode. But this year, I don't know. There's just a couple that I'm like, oh, I don't want you to win almost. And I won't name names, but that's
names.
Never happened before. But no, to be fair, I think I'd be happy with anyone and say Giuseppe's. No, I'm thinking of the third challenge, but his third challenge was incredible, and I don't know, I think it'd be lovely for him to win for his boys, or Jürgen for his rabbit. So
Humphrey.
It's Humphrey. That's why we love him, really.
I know, his house rabbit. It does remind me, the slightly Team Jürgen or Team Giuseppe. It reminds me of that terrible time when I was in school and people started reading Twilight, and it was, are you Team Edward or Team Jacob? And yeah, it's just not good. Jürgen did get first place in the technical this week,
He did.
Smug. Well deserved probably, but smug. And Lizzie, she came last because, as you say, she didn't follow your expert trick of seeing who else is taking their baklava out of the oven. So
I know, it's so much easier to say when you're sitting watching it at home, because I know that if I was in the tent, which I'd love one day, I can imagine I would be flapping like crazy. So, I wouldn't have made it to week 6. Let's put it that far. But yeah, no, it was a shame with Lizzie, particularly after she did so well in the signature, which she hated.
Yeah.
She then, it was a bit of a tricky one for technical.
Coming into the Showstopper Challenge, we had Amanda, who was on thin ice, Lizzie and George. So it was the 3 of them. We weren't really sure, how it was going to go, and they really had to have a good technical to keep them in, I think, because they were all 3 of them were sort of wavering. The Showstopper this week was an intricate terrine pie, and you had to have an ornate pastry decoration and a brilliant decoration inside with the filling. And I cannot believe that they were given 4.5 hours to make this terrine. It was such a long time.
I know, it felt like it's like, can you just put like half an hour of that onto the technical, please?
Exactly.
We have this though, every year we have a couple of really long bakes, and you think, I would get so bored in the tent, because a good amount of time with that, considering the pies were quite like stocky, they were big, thick pies, they would have taken ages to cook.
I know, they would have done, and a few people were having a bit of trouble with the cooking times, but 4.5 hours, and it started off tipping it down in the tent. They did say, well, we literally can't hear ourselves think, but it's raining and we've got to carry on. So you're in the rain making a pie. I think Giuseppe was like, this is the sort of weather we'd need a nice roaring open fire and everything, not to be making a terrine or having any of this stress. So
Nice.
Mad. And then it was then we had a little bit of speculation, didn't we, when Freya left, saying, well, maybe pastry week, she's been got out at the right time because maybe they're going to have a meat challenge. And they did have a meat challenge.
Yeah, it's like we knew this was coming. Having said that, I think she would have been quite interesting in this one, because I think she would have gone for something not meat. I'm thinking Christelle, she had like, didn't she have sweet potato curry or something in one of her? So, you know, I think there would have been a way for her to do that. But yeah, it's very interesting that straight away, the week after, we have what I said, the pork pie challenge, which is essentially what this was.
Yeah,
I was like, yes!
Everyone's got their sausage meat out and everything. There's beef and pork and... Come on. There's beef and pork. Freya doesn't want to be around that. As soon as she left the tent, there was just bowls of meat everywhere. It seems very odd. Yeah,
it was a strange one, but I don't know. I quite like the idea of it, and I always like the challenges like this where they have the like the cross section cuts where you have to have a design going through. They've done that with cakes before, and I think they've done that with a pie or something similar before. Yeah, I always like those challenges because you see the outside and then it's like, oh, is it going to work inside or not? Yeah, so I love this challenge. This was a really good one.
It was good, and everyone had quite an interesting and unique take on the flavours and their designs. One person who did a good design that went all the way through, she wasn't sure if it was going to work or not, was Lizzie, and she did potato fishes going all the way through her pie. I like how they called it a Neptune pie. Is that a thing that people call fish pies? I guess. But I liked that.
It's going to be now. Everybody's going to take off.
It is. I really liked it. Rather than fish pie sounds a bit boring. But we're going to have a Neptune pie for dinner. Oh, yes. Lovely. Yes, please. So Lizzie did well. She had salmon, ricotta, spinach, and she did a bit of a glittery fish design on the top, which I quite liked as well.
Looks so good. Lovely pastry work on top with the scales of the tail and a little trident. Yeah. Do you know what? She was the one who had to save herself. And I was so impressed with what she did for this one. As you said a few times, Lizzie, she's ticking along in that middle ground. She's in that sort of Amanda George group.
Yeah.
But she pulls out some absolute blinders sometimes.
Yeah, and she did pull it out the bag with the Neptune pie. It looked so good. And it looked good inside and on top. And a few people, they did sort of not as much decoration, and so it didn't look as good. And that is someone, Chigs, who actually did that. I thought his idea was good. He had lots of pork. It was his sort of paying homage to the Leicester pork pie and everything. And it had gherkins and apricots and chicken in there as well. But it didn't look great inside, and the lattice work on top wasn't as good. So Lizzie, she really came from sort of the bottom. Well, yeah, actually the bottom at the technical, and her Choux-nuts were okay. But then she just did amazing decoration, whereas Chigs could have done a bit better, I thought.
Yeah, I agree. His lattice work on top was sort of a little bit wonky, and it was, for someone like me who loves that cross section of the pie in these challenges, literally they cut through and it was a brick of pork. It was a breeze block almost.
Oh, God,
Freya
it was.
Would not have appreciated this one at all.
No. There were a few peas in there.
Literally, so you cut into it and then there's like a couple of peas, and that was about all we had in there. And I was like, it's just 2 peas and a little rectangle of something white. I lost track of his, but it was just a hunk of meat. It was crazy.
It was amusing. And Chigs, you just have to put his next to Lizzie's, and then someone else that did such a beautiful design was Giuseppe, as you said earlier.
Amazing.
His was unbelievable. He created an owl because his wife's apparent favourite bird and animal is an owl, and he had in it cauliflower, Dutch cheese, carrot, ham, spinach, beef, pecorino cheese, loads. I've just written a list, but I mean, it looked excellent. I mean, that's probably the best thing I've seen baked on top of a pie before.
Yeah, so good. And just, as Prue said, that you could tell it was an owl straight away. It was quite a simple design. He'd used sort of shaped areas to make it. He had these brilliant poppy seed eyes for it and everything as well. It was, it looked outstanding. And it didn't need lots of colour and stuff on top as well. And some of them went for, like Lizzie's with the tail on top, went with colour. His looked more classic, I suppose. But it just, it was so effective. And to be fair, I think for me, looking over all of them, that was probably the best pie in the Showstopper round, hands down. I thought it was excellent. Yeah.
It was so good. And what is something that we have to watch out for this week? Soggy bottoms and Giuseppe's. His just looked perfect. That side when he took it out the tin, I was like, oh my God, that's literally like, if you had to draw a pie, that's exactly what you want it to look like. It was perfect. Yeah. There was no cracks, no juice coming out everywhere like some of them. His was just amazing. I'm just still daydreaming of it. It was that good.
I know, it was lovely. And you even got the cross section too, which was hard in a circular pie because obviously they're going to cut a wedge. So he was sort of piping things in, sort of in circles inside. Yeah, so clever, so clever.
So good. I think we have to talk about the two people that were sort of... not having a great time with pastry week, really. It's George and Amanda, because both of them, they seem to have both really misjudged the timings, and George seems to have been doing that quite a lot. Amanda, she just got completely carried away with her decoration. So she was doing a chicken pate sausage with floral decorations, but she also made little pork pigs, which were really, really cute, and I liked those. The pork pigs. But she was really placing like individual little things on the bacon, and then on the top like really small intricate things. And she did say that at home her husband gets really frustrated because he's like, I want to eat the pie now, but you're still decorating it. And she took a long time to decorate, so she had to keep hers in the oven longer. That was the thing, really, wasn't it? George and Amanda, they had to keep it in the oven longer, whereas everybody else had that time to put it in the fridge to cool down so they could take it out the mould. But George and Amanda, they were still looking into the oven, whereas everyone else was standing near a complete pie.
Yeah, it's that age-old thing that we have in Bake Off of if you don't get it prepped and in the oven quickly, you're screwed, really. And there's just no coming back from it. And it was a real shame because both of them, I liked the stories behind them. I liked the idea of the flavours. And, Prue and Paul both said that they love the flavours in there. But... it's just that moment and you're just like, oh. But at the same time, as you and I have said every week, we haven't had any huge drama this year. And so to have that this week, there is that moment of they're like, oh, and you could see as Amanda was trying to take her pie out the mould and sort of, it was great because the pie came out the bottom and then the top of the pie stayed on top of the tin. And you're like, oh God. You're like, no, it's finally happening. I felt gutted for both of them, but at the same time, great TV.
Exactly, it was so good, and it was like Giuseppe was stood there going like this, literally hand over mouth, shocked, terrified, and Lizzie was looking over as well, and she said it's like open heart surgery. And I thought there were a few interesting things about baking the pie, obviously putting it in the fridge or the freezer to cool down so you can get it out the tin. I didn't really think of that, but also I didn't think about having these little chimneys in the top for the steam to come out. Yes. People were putting like the end of their piping bags in or making a tin foil little thing, and that was really interesting. I wouldn't have even thought of it. But Amanda, when she was trying to take hers out of the tin, she didn't really think that the pastry had sort of cooked onto the top of the tin. So she didn't sort of trim it or anything. She just tried to lift it off. And because it was stuck on there on the top, as you say, completely came off with it. And I don't know what she was expecting because, well, maybe she just thought, oh, the time's running out. I need to get the pie out of the tin. But it looked like she just broke it, and then she was trying to be very quick to slam it back on, and I just think it made a lot more of a mess. And Chigs, bless him, he did go along and help, and you could see he really wanted to help her and make it okay, but he was like, this is hot, Amanda, I'm holding it, but it's boiling and burning my hands.
I'd still like to have fingerprints at the end of this. It was a shame. But it's funny because the tins they had almost like hinges so you could open them up. And that's where George came unstuck with his. He sort of took one side off. and it sort of collapsed, and then he tried taking the other side off. He left the bottom on it completely.
Yeah.
But Amanda seemed to just forget that and be like, oh yes, I'll just let it slide through. No, it's got for a reason. And yeah, I think, just as you say, in the blind panic of having, I think it was less than 10 minutes to get it out and ready. She just went for it and went the wrong way about it, which was a real shame, because I liked the idea. I liked George's one with his sort of decoration on the outside with the black swirls and everything. But yeah, execution for both of them was just a little bit off the mark.
I know, and I think George's, I love the sound of his because I'm a big fan of Christmas, and he did a Christmas dinner terrine, and so he had like this massive bacon laid out and some carrot, and he was wrapping his sausage in that, and then he had duck and turkey stuffing, amazing. But something that I thought was, foreshadowing, I guess, his end result was when he rolled up his sausage and he wanted it to sort of be a bit thicker, or like it was solid, so it went into his terrine, and he put it in the fridge or the freezer and forgot about it. And so I've just written down in my notes, George froze his sausage, ! Because it came out and Paul was looking, you could see, and he was holding it like, oh god, this is a lot more frozen than I thought it was going to be. So that was one of the issues at the beginning. But then there was a moment when he put his in the oven, and bearing in mind he was late putting it in the oven, he was looking and he needed to repair something. I couldn't even really work out what he was repairing, but he had that dilemma of should he take it out the oven or just leave it in there? And he decided to take it out the oven and put extra bits of pastry on the top.
I know. I can't remember what I think he was trying to do something with the egg wash. He put too much egg on top or something. But it was that thing of, and it was great because he was sort of articulating it and going, do I take it out? Do I leave it in? Do I take it out? And literally we're all at home going, leave it in an oven. Like seriously, just leave it in the oven, please. And as soon as he takes it out, everyone just face-palmed as a nation. But he wanted to do it. Thing is with George is that some of his have been really, really messy. If we think back to the first couple of weeks, he had the sort of mini roll, the little Swiss rolls or whatever it was. But they looked atrocious, and he's really tried with that all the way through. And so I think he was slightly more focused on that, and he thought, well, a couple of minutes to make it look better. Particularly as there'd been a lot of talk about Lizzie and finesse earlier on in the episode. George probably thought, if I can try and finesse this a bit and just get it right, then this could stand me in good stead. But he just didn't have the time. He really didn't.
And as you say, when he went to take it out of the oven and try and get it out of the tin, he ended up leaving the bottom part of the tin on it to sort of help with its structure. But I also liked the moment when he tried to prop up one side with the knife block. I thought that was a ambitious thing to try and do. But he did manage to sort of save his pie slightly by leaving it in the tin. Whereas Amanda, she did get it out, but the side completely collapsed. So it was sort of who was going to do the worst, Amanda or George? And I feel like there might have been a tiny bit of sabotage in there, because there was a moment when, I don't know why, Amanda tried to start getting George to dance, to do like a Greek dance. And she was like, come on, George, let's go. And they did start to dance, but I was like, you both have a lot to do right now. Was she trying to be like, I can see George is struggling. I know I'm struggling. How can I distract George? Because she was very, very talkative. It was a bit like the Amanda show this week. There were lots of jokes, lots of sort of odd quips and things. And then she did start dancing. And I thought, is she trying to take George away from his bake so hers looks better?
Genius technique. It was a strange one. And funny enough, it's something we've spoken about a lot over the years of, I knew that there was potential for Amanda or George to go home this week because they have more coverage than they ever had before. Like, we learned a lot more about George. He was, we had a lot more time at his bench. Amanda was dancing around the place and being a completely different person to what we've seen. So I sort of got that foreboding feeling then of like, oh, one of them's going home. Don't know who it's going to be, but you can tell, can't you, at this point? Yeah,
it sets it up. Like last week, Freya was getting all the screen time, and I wonder if other people, if they're just casual sort of watchers of the Bake Off, just enjoy it, aren't doing a podcast or thinking too much about it. Do they notice that? Because it seems so obvious. Because next week I'm going to start watching it and I'm going to text you who's getting the most screen time at the beginning to who's going to go. Because, it is right. It does kind of make you think, okay, now I can see who's probably going. And a few years ago, we talked about, when they were announcing who was going to leave, it was always the sort of same camera progression, like the first person who was, on screen as soon as they started saying, and the person that goes out this week is, and then the person that's on camera then is usually the person that goes, because then they cut to like 3 people, and then when it's announced, it's back to that first person. So it's a weird thing. I wonder if other people notice that.
I know, it's these little things that we notice just because we've seen so many episodes. But you're right, the best, if you're in that thing of like the person going home this week, the place you want to be is the last person before they then say who it is, because they're not you.
Exactly.
Like, we know that to be true.
We know how it works. One part that I quite liked when they were tasting the Showstoppers is when they got to George's, there was a bit of worry that the sausage, because it had been frozen and it had been taken out the oven and everything, that it wasn't cooked. And George, who's quite humble and quite reserved and quite quiet sometimes, he fought back a little bit, and I liked it, because Paul was like, I'm not quite sure if this sausage is cooked, and he was like, I've probed it 3 times, Paul, it says it's 92 degrees. He's very like, I have done it, Paul, you're not going to die. So I like that side of George.
Yeah, there was a real bit of firing up there. And yeah, I did like that bit when it's like, you're not going to die, it's fine, I've checked it. I'm not a completely irresponsible baker here, Paul.
Exactly.
But yeah, it was just all mushy in the middle, which they didn't like. Both of them sort of, Paul and Prue both just sort of turned their nose up, like, no.
It was just like a large wad of sausage meat though. So like, I guess it would be like that. There's not going to be like a crispy outer bit or anything. It is just going to be like a stodgy bit of sausage in the middle, because it was a large sausage they had made. Exactly. And I think we need to talk, obviously, about the person who really excelled in the Showstopper this week, and that was Christelle. She's been going so well throughout the whole time, and she's been really good with her details and her flavour combinations, but it was because it was a very sort of emotional and family-driven bake for her this week that I think she did well. So she did, dedicated to her late great-grandmother, who they called Lily Nana, which I thought was really sweet. She made a terrine, but in the shape of her house, her cottage, little flowers on the door and everything, which was so lovely. And she had 2 different types of curry, I think, in there. It said peanut, cumin, potato curry, chicken, pickling spices, and chili powder. And yeah, I think there was some sweet potato in there too. And it was just a really different thing from everyone else. And they said at the beginning, Paul and Prue, that actually it was quite brave to do like a curry pie, because she might have too much liquid in there. It might not necessarily work. And it just looked lovely. And I loved the emotional story. I was a bit of a sucker for this is for my late great-grandmother. If it's anything about Nans, I'm like, oh yeah, Nans, okay, you can win.
just take it. Just take it.
Yeah.
No, I was the same. I got a bit emotional actually when they were judging at the end. But no, I thought she was brave, because you say curry or anything like that that's very wet can really compromise the pastry. Having said that, this year we had some major issues then, like juices like leaking out the sides of the pies, because they put so much meat into them. Whereas actually for Christelle, she used chicken, which is obviously really lean and you don't get a lot of moisture out of anyway, and lots of curry, which she could make first and reduce down and get rid of some moisture. So I think she played it quite cleverly there. And it was, as you say, it was very, very different, came with a great story. It looked fantastic. But, and I've got to admit this, because Channel 4 got me on this, because last week on the preview, and we love the preview. It's like literally my favourite bit of the show. Forget the Bake Off. I just love the preview.
The last 5 seconds.
It's the best bit. It's honestly, it's the bit where I'm most animated in the whole episode. But it was, they did the sort of thing of what's coming up next week. And there was that moment in there last week where the pie was on the table, and then they have the shot of Christelle, and then Paul goes, have you seen this? And her eyes bulge, as in like, oh, what's happened? And that totally threw me, because all the way through this episode, she did great with her Choux-nuts with the miso caramel. She came second in the technical. It got to the Showstopper, and I just went, she's going home this week. Like, there's gonna be a massive disaster, and there wasn't. They got me, and I was so annoyed that Channel 4 managed to get me on that one.
That's so annoying. They got you with the editing there, made you watch this week as if you weren't going to anyway.
Yeah, of course,
But yeah, it was an interesting thing, wasn't it? Paul again asserting his sort of bake-off power, being like playing that little thing of, oh, have you seen this down here? And was like pointing to like the table or something, and she looked terrified as if she was about to get told off, and then his hand whipped out for the handshake and she shook it and like fell to the floor. I mean, Paul must love it. And he said like, oh, I don't really like giving out handshakes. Shut up, Paul. Yeah, you do. You'd literally love that power of making people absolutely like melt because you've given them a handshake. I mean, she looked so happy, but he also liked playing that game.
Oh yeah, he did. But I thought it was really clever editing, because I just in the back of my mind was like, well, I know it's going to mess up because I've seen it in the preview, and but it was so nice for her to get the handshake for that, and particularly for that bake because of the story behind it. I think that's what got me. I was like, this is so nice.
Yeah, I loved it. And then when she called her family at the end, unlike Jürgen, who no one picked up sadly that first week, Christelle, her whole family seemed to be there and were like whooping and like screaming, and it was so nice because she'd obviously discussed with them that she was going to make their nan's cottage and everything, so it must have been a really lovely thing to do, and it would have meant a lot to her that for that bake she's been given a handshake, and it's really rare that we get to see a handshake in the Showstopper as well.
Yeah, this is the thing, and again I think we've said at some point in this series that we only really get handshakes in the signatures, because the technical, they don't know who it is, and the Showstopper, they're sort of standing a couple of meters back from the table, so we don't really get the big reactions in a Showstopper. So to get that is monumental, that's huge. And I think, no, I don't think cynically actually, I think it's really good that at this stage we have another like competitor for the final, because we are 6 episodes in. We had Jürgen got 2-star bakers, Giuseppe got 2-star bakers, obviously we had the odd Chigs week where he got it, and it looked like coming into the Showstopper and looking at them, I mean Giuseppe's one was absolutely fantastic, could have very easily got star baker. I think Jürgen could have got star baker. He did really well in the technical, and his pie was quite good. So, that was dry, wasn't it? But yeah, I sat there and I thought, either of those two could take it again. So it was really good when, and I'm never the one who says who got Star Baker, but I'm taking it this week.
Do it.
That Christelle got Star Baker this week, which was lovely, and it was just nice that at this stage in, we didn't have a predictable, oh, it's Jürgen again, or oh, it's Giuseppe again, and just makes it feel a bit more foregone for the final. It was like, oh, Christelle's got it. Maybe she'll be in the final 4 now. It was really good.
Yeah, it was good. And I thought, as you say, she was probably the right person to get it, because it was someone different. And she did do really well with that Showstopper. And she did an interesting flavour combination at the beginning. And, she was second in the technical too.
Yeah,
so she had a really
technical.
good week. So I think she was well deserved. The person to leave, though, this week, it was between George and Amanda. Again. And I was so surprised that it wasn't George and it was actually Amanda. And I thought Amanda's reaction, she was either like fighting off tears and didn't really want to show her emotion, or she was just genuinely annoyed.
I know. I was thinking it's the police officer in her. She doesn't want to show the emotion. It was the stony face. To be fair, I couldn't call it from that one. I felt that it was going to be Amanda because her Showstopper was worse in the way it was. But, she was slightly ahead of George in the technical. And her Choux-nuts weren't too bad either. Neither of them were too bad. So I think it could have been, it really could have been either, to be fair.
Yeah.
So Lizzie saved herself, but I don't know. I did find myself feeling a little bit like, oh, Amanda. Okay, it wasn't as foregone as it normally is, and I was kind of shocked when it was her. Exactly.
George was saying that he felt like as soon as they started talking about, okay, it's a sad time, someone's got to leave because we've become really attached to them, he said that he was saying in his head, George. And then when they said Amanda, he must have been like, oh my God, I'm here another week. So it will be interesting to see if he does sort of step his game up next week for Caramel Week and sees, whether he can actually stay in, because I feel like George, unfortunately, is a bit of a cert to go out next week, really, because it was so close this week. Unless someone does something horrendous next week, which we always hope for, I can seeing it being George go. So I think, I was shocked a bit that it was Amanda over George, but you're right, the Showstopper did mean that it was her. So next week I feel like it's going to be George, definitely. But I do have a part of me hopes that he carries on and just ends up at the final. I'd love that.
That'd be great. It'd be Laura all over again. No, I think, he I mean, he's the one to beat next week, isn't he, for everybody, really? Because they've just got a place above him and he's got to go home. I think what will be really interesting, 2 things. The preview for next week, you should say Caramel Week.
Yeah.
We've never had that before. Excited. Very
so excited.
It's like, because the thing is, sugar and caramel, they have bits of it every year, and it always goes wrong because it's too hot, or and this week would have been perfect because it was raining. But yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting. But there wasn't any sort of major drama in the preview, so that makes me think that it's going to sort of run its normal course and George will go out. But then I can't call who's going to be knocked out before the final, because I don't. Obviously, the only person, if George goes out next week, the only person who hasn't got Starbaker then is Lizzie.
Yep.
It's only Lizzie and George who haven't got them now, but she does have episodes where she's great.
I know. It is a bit difficult. I think that, well, I still think the final is going to be Jürgen, Giuseppe and Christelle. That's my thing. We did say Chigs a few weeks back because of his Starbaker, but, you know, he's still a little bit rusty, you know, with his soggy bottom this week and everything. So I think it's going to be Christelle and Jürgen and Giuseppe. And it might be quite a hard one to call, really, in the final. So my guess, George next week, then Lizzie, then Chigs, and then it's the 3 left.
Possibly. I'm just having a look. So in terms of, because you know they have like the Starbaker and the person who goes, but also they have like the top and bottoms as well.
Yeah.
So Chigs has been has been a favourite baker once and a Starbaker once. Same with Christelle. So very level playing.
Yeah.
Giuseppe has had 2 Starbaker and has been a favourite baker every other week. So he's not been in that safe middle zone.
Yeah.
Jürgen's had 2 Starbakers and 2 favourites and 2 safe weeks. And Lizzie has had 5 safe weeks, so she's never been in the bottom.
That's good.
In the risky position, but she's only been a favourite baker once and hasn't got Starbaker. So yeah, you'd argue that it's sort of Oh, and George, I didn't even mention because
he's going out next week, isn't he?
He's going next week.
Poor George. You know. Well, Caramel Week, those 5 seconds at the end of the episode, which you said are your most favourite. It did look quite good, though, what they were going to have to make. It looked like they were doing some sort of, like, tart at the beginning. I don't know if it's like going to be like a treacle tart or I don't know. But there was someone had a short crust pastry case in there. I was looking because we always get to this part and I'm like, oh, God, I don't remember. So I was like, right, we're going to have to look. We can't disappoint the In the Mix fans again by not remembering what's on the next week. And it looked like they were going to do sort of like a dome sugarwork showstopper. Maybe it's like a snow globe or something. That's my guess. And then they were having to make, for the technical, they said like 10 chocolate fingers, but they didn't look like chocolate fingers. They looked like Twixes. So maybe it's going to be a sandwich jammy biscuit all over again.
What's it going to be? It's going to be a layered chocolate caramel finger biscuit.
Nice. Good guess. Good guess.
Yeah, get those in now. I also think they were making honeycomb at one point as well. Like, it's going to be interesting to see the different things. But yeah, no, that was definitely a Twix.
It was definitely
a Twix.
I know. So we're going to go with, so you had layered in there. I think I'm going to go with like a chocolate and caramel biscuit finger is what I think they're going to call it. Please, listeners, please, if you've got an idea of what they're going to do before next week, please let us know what the non-advertising version of a Twix is going to be and what they're going to call it, because it'll be very funny and we want to see who wins. I feel like we've nailed it. If it's not a Twix and it's just a chocolate finger, I'm going to be really disappointed now. But there's got to be caramel in there, surely.
Exactly. It's got to be. I mean, what else do you have? You have like a drifter bar. That's wafer instead of biscuit. No, it's going to be a Twix.
It is.
It's going to be a Twix.
And
maybe
you know,
Mars.
Ooh. Oh no. No, it's Twix. It's definitely Twix.
No, it's Twix.
We've committed to it now. I know.
Twix.
How can you make 10 Mars bars in a time? No. But you know what everyone should get, and it's not a hashtag ad, it's just my personal recommendation. The Whisper Gold hazelnut for next week for Caramel Week. It's the perfect snack. So if you're going to bake something, but also get your Whisper Gold hazelnut. It's great.
I'm going to the supermarket in a couple of hours. I'm literally going to video myself buying one of these and put it on social media.
Please do. I'm going to put that on our Instagram account, which is @BakeOffPod. If you want to follow us, we post lots of ridiculous clips from the podcast, sort of share some of the behind the scenes photos. And one of my favourite things that we've started doing is finding some of the funny tweets that they put out every week for the Bake Off.
Yes.
They're very amusing. It does make me laugh. Lots of it is Jürgen looking like Winnie the Pooh, but we get some funny tweets on there too, which I like. So I'd
the way to
recommend
do it.
following that. Exactly. Well, JP, we've nattered on a lot about Pastry Week this week just because there was a lot of drama in the end, so we have to.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly. Thanks for joining me again, and I'm looking forward to Twix Week next week.
Now, are you a left Twix or a right Twix? That's the thing, isn't it?
They're the same. Come on.